You ever look at a poll predicting an election and just think, how did they get that so wrong? Yeah, you're not alone. It is one of the biggest questions in politics. And the answer? Well, it's way more fascinating than you might think. Let's get into it. To really get our heads around polling, we're not going to start with numbers. We're going to start right here, in a forest. And I know that might seem a little weird, but this complex, interconnected ecosystem, it holds the perfect metaphor for understanding why predicting what people think is so incredibly difficult. So when you see a headline with a big old polling number, that's like looking at a single tall tree. It's what's visible, right? But what's really happening is everything going on beneath the surface, this hidden ecosystem of biases and behaviors and signals that really determine the health of that entire forest. To understand the tree, you have to understand the soil, the roots, the whole system. Okay, so one of the biggest threats to a forest is a lack of diversity. Picture a tree farm with these perfect rows of the exact same species. That's a monoculture. When a single disease or a drought hits, the whole thing can just collapse. Well, modern pollinating is facing a very, very similar problem. And the scale of this problem is just staggering. For a lot of polls today, over 90% of the people they even try to contact simply don't answer. That means the tiny, tiny fraction of people who do respond are doing something the overwhelming majority are not. And that creates a potential monoculture of respondents.
And this leads us to our first major concept, non-response bias. It's this idea that the people who choose to answer a poll might be systematically different from the ones who don't. Maybe they're more politically engaged or more trusting, or they just have way stronger opinions. If that's true, your sample isn't a miniature version of the country, it's a skewed one.
But here's the paradox. The main fix for this can actually totally backfire. See, pollsters use something called weighting to adjust their sample. If they have too few young men, they just give the answers from the young men they did reach more weight. But as researcher Michael Bailey points out, what if the few young men who did answer are just fundamentally different from the dozens who hung up? You're not fixing the problem, you're just amplifying the bias. There's another threat to diversity out there, and this one's a psychological one. It's called herding. See, no pollster wants to be that one big outlier who got it spectacularly wrong. So there can be this subtle, sometimes even unconscious, tendency to kind of nudge results to be closer to what other polls are saying. This creates a false consensus. All the polls start to look the same, but they might all be drifting toward the wrong number together. So, we've talked about the visible problem of who is and isn't responding. But now we have to go deeper into the unseen signals. Just like a forest communicates with these invisible chemical signals, a population sends out signals we can't easily measure. So let's just think about this for a second. Why don't people answer? I mean, the reasons are complicated. Maybe they're busy, maybe they don't trust the media, or maybe, and this is the absolutely critical part, their reason for not answering is directly connected to the very opinions the pollster is trying to measure. This brings us to the core concept of endogenous non-response. It's a fancy term, I know, but it's for a simple, really powerful idea. For example, what if voters who were just totally disillusioned with all politicians were also the least likely to want to talk to a pollster about politicians? Their opinion is actually causing their non-response. And standard weighting can't fix this because you can't measure disillusionment for people who won't even talk to you.
So the crucial point is this. It is not enough to know you're missing, say, white working class voters. You have to understand if the ones you're missing are different because their support for a certain candidate makes them less willing to talk to pollsters in the first place. The why is everything. The polling ecosystem is also facing this massive climate shift. For decades, the gold standard was calling people on the phone. But now, of course, everything's moving online. And this has just fundamentally changed the entire environment.
This change introduces something called the mode effect. Turns out people give different answers to the exact same question depending on whether they're talking to a human being on the phone or just clicking a button privately on a screen. The key difference here is the social dynamic. When a live interviewer asks you a sensitive question, we might give a more socially desirable answer just to avoid sounding judgmental or uninformed. But when we're alone with our screen, we might be a little more brutally honest. And the difference can be absolutely dramatic. Take this Pew Research experiment. They asked the exact same question 2 different ways. When asked by a person on the phone, 62% said yes. But when they were asked to answer privately online, that number dropped all the way to 48%. That is a massive 14-point difference caused not by a change in public opinion, but just by the method of asking. So the challenges are huge.
The ecosystem is fragile. How are pollsters responding? Well, the most innovative researchers are redesigning surveys from the ground up to be more resilient and to actively account for these hidden biases.
One of the most clever new tools is a simple but really profound change. Instead of just launching into the political questions, some researchers now give respondents a choice. As you can see here, they ask, for which of the following would you like to provide your opinions? And the options are movies, politics, health, or sports. So how does this work? It's basically a three-step process. First, you offer this choice to a random half of your survey takers. Second, this ingeniously reveals who has a high propensity to discuss politics. It directly measures political engagement. Third, and this is the magic, you can then statistically compare the political answers of the eager group to those who might have chosen sports but were asked political questions anyway. This helps you see and correct for the bias of political enthusiasm. The really crucial point here is the shift in thinking. Instead of just trying to weight away bias after the fact, this approach designs the survey to intentionally reveal the bias. You're literally building a bias detector right into the instrument itself. It's proactive, not just reactive.
And this brings us all the way back to the big question. With all these challenges, non-response, herding, mode effects, these hidden biases, should we just give up on polls entirely?
Well, the real answer is to change how we think about them. A single poll isn't a crystal ball that's predicting the future. It's more like a scientific instrument measuring the health of the public opinion ecosystem at one moment in time. The goal isn't always a perfect prediction. It's about understanding the complex, the dynamic, and the often hidden forces that are shaping our world. It's about understanding the health of the entire forest.